At 2:23 hours, 3 Ukrainian FP-1 naval drones sliced through the dark waters of the Black Sea, skimming just meters above the waves at nearly 180 kilometers per hour. Their target, a Russian spy vessel, had been a constant thorn in Ukraine's side, intercepting communications and crippling naval drone missions for weeks. Anchored 15 miles off Novorossiysk, the ship's R381T sensor arrays had been listening, recording, and decoding every faint radio whisper for over a month and a half. It had almost mapped out Ukraine's launch patterns and was just days away from predicting future strikes with terrifying accuracy. The patrol had been uneventful until now, but within seconds, everything was about to change. Unknown to the Russian crew, a trio of Ukrainian drones was racing straight toward them, barely 3 meters above the sea's surface. Their plywood bodies, light and radar absorbent, made them nearly invisible. Their radar cross-section smaller than a seagull's wingbeat. Systems built to detect sleek aluminum aircraft stood no chance of seeing them coming. 20 minutes after launch, a Russian 4-post-R reconnaissance drone appeared on the horizon, flying its routine racetrack pattern about 30 kilometers off the Ukrainian coast. Its Canadian-made MX-15DI camera could spot something the size of a basketball from 5 kilometers away. Even more impressive, its thermal sensors could register temperature changes of just 2 degrees Celsius. At 2:45, one of the 4-post operators noticed something odd. 3 small heat spikes moving east at low altitude, traveling at 180 kilometers per hour. The signatures matched nothing they'd seen before. They zoomed in, trying to identify the objects, but the drone's pre-programmed evasion kicked in. Instantly, they dropped down to just 2 meters above the water, disappearing into what radar operators call ground clutter, the noisy echoes of the sea's surface that hide low-flying targets. Within minutes, the drone's plywood frames cooled to match the temperature of the water. On thermal imaging, they simply vanished. The Russian crew logged the contact as possible birds and resumed their patrol, not realizing they had just ignored the vanguard of a deadly strike. Back on land, the reason for the rushed Ukrainian launch became clear. Russian Shahed drones had discovered their coastal launch site. Within minutes, explosions rocked the area. 50-kilogram warheads turned the operator's control equipment into molten debris. The team barely escaped alive. The spy ship's intelligence network was quick to react, but not quick enough to stop what was now in motion. By 3:30 hours, as the FP-1 drones continued crossing the Black Sea, another wave of 20 Ukrainian naval drones launched toward Sevastopol at 80 kilometers per hour. What followed was one of the most elaborate acts of deception in modern naval warfare. This swarm was no ordinary attack group. It was a decoy formation, a fleet of modified jet skis and small civilian boats retrofitted with basic guidance systems. Each one cost less than $10,000, designed to mimic the appearance and radar signature of Ukraine's much more advanced Mira V5 naval drones. On Russian radar screens, they looked identical, a massive assault force bearing down on the Black Sea fleet. Creating such a convincing illusion took precision. The decoy drones had to follow believable attack patterns, spreading into formations, converging on potential targets, and performing evasive maneuvers. For the first 50 kilometers, Ukrainian operators guided them via satellite link. After that, they switched to autopilot mode, maintaining formation and transmitting fake signals on frequencies that Russian intelligence monitored closely. Some even carried heat generators to simulate the infrared glow of real engines. To Russian eyes and sensors, it was a perfect storm. Russian doctrine dictated that any visible threat must be countered immediately. At Novorossiysk, 6 Ka-27 PL anti-submarine helicopters sat on alert. 4 more were stationed in Sevastopol. These were the Black Sea Fleet's main line of defense against naval drones. Ships were too slow, fighter jets too high and fast, but helicopters could hover, sweep, and strike. Each could drop RGB-16 depth charges that destroyed anything within 50 meters. Within minutes of the alert, all 6 Novorossiysk helicopters lifted off, rotors chopping through the dawn air as they sped west toward the attack. Every minute they flew in the wrong direction gave the real drones, still flying east, more time. By the time Russian command realized the ruse, the helicopters would be 360 kilometers out of position. The spy ship now sat completely unprotected. No air cover, no quick response force, and no way to verify radar contacts. The three FP-1 drones quietly adjusted course 15 degrees north, a move that seemed random, but wasn't. Ukrainian analysts had studied Russian radar behavior for months. They knew that two Podlet K1 radar stations covered this sector, each rotating at exactly 10 revolutions per minute. Imagine two spinning flashlights for 4 seconds each minute. They both pointed away from the same narrow corridor. That corridor, just 2 kilometers wide, was the only blind spot. The drones had to hit it perfectly, but the Russians had recently adapted. They had started randomizing radar rotation to remove those predictable gaps. The safe corridor was collapsing fast. At 4:47, the first FP-1 entered the gap. Invisible for 4 seconds, barely detectable for 2, then gone again. The radar operator noticed a small, fleeting contact, moving fast but too small to classify. He logged it and moved on. 30 seconds later, the second drone passed through flawlessly, but the third wasn't as lucky. A microscopic defect in its gyroscope made it drift slightly off course. 200 meters, then 300. At 4:49, both radars caught it clearly. A single blip appeared. Altitude 50 meters, speed 180. One of the operators reported it as possible bird, preferring to focus on the larger threat. The decoy swarm still lighting up every screen in Sevastopol. The third drone had slipped through, but it had burned valuable fuel correcting its course. It would reach the target area with barely a minute to spare. Meanwhile, 15 miles off Novorossiysk, the Russian spy ship continued its quiet surveillance mission. 2 small patrol boats circled it at a 5-kilometer radius, a protective screen standard since the sinking of the Moskva. The ship's radar guided them like a quarterback directing its players, maintaining a defensive net around the intelligence vessel. At 5 a.m., the decoy fleet performed its final act. As Russian helicopters closed in, the 20 fake drones scattered in every direction. Some ran out of fuel, others intentionally beached themselves along the coast, while a few simply drifted aimlessly. None aimed for real targets. Their mission, distraction, was complete. The helicopters spent over an hour chasing ghosts, burning fuel and firing at empty water. By the time they turned back, they were low on ammunition and hundreds of kilometers away. The true attack was still inbound. Morning fog rolled in across the Black Sea, reducing visibility to almost nothing. Perfect cover for the real strike. By 0600 hours, the lead FP-1 was just 240 kilometers from its target when its GPS signal began to shift. The drone wasn't turning. The world around it was. Russian forces had activated their R-330ZH Zhetel GPS spoofing system from Crimea. It didn't just jam signals, it lied. The system broadcast fake GPS coordinates at 100 watts, overpowering the real satellite's faint transmissions. The result, the drone thought it was on course while being guided toward a Russian air defense battery. But Ukraine had learned from experience. Every 50 kilometers, abandoned oil platforms dotted the Black Sea. The FP-1's onboard camera recognized their silhouettes and reset its position based on stored coordinates. No satellite deception could fool a human trick. The Mark I eyeball, as pilots call it. The second drone wasn't as fortunate. Around 6:15, its GPS receiver failed entirely. Not from jamming, but from a cheap Chinese capacitor that couldn't handle the cold. Without guidance, it switched to inertial navigation, a system that drifts roughly 10 meters per minute over water. Within half an hour, it was 8 kilometers off course. At 6:45, it hit the water silently. No explosion, no trace, just gone. 2 drones remained. The third FP-1 pressed on, 5 kilometers behind its leader, maintaining perfect heading, at least for now. Then the Russian spy ship finally went active. Its Mineral ME radar system began scanning the western approaches, painting the sea with pulses of energy. Inside the ship, the signals intelligence team worked furiously. Every electronic device gives off tiny frequencies, harmonics, electronic footprints. By analyzing them, they could detect anything from aircraft to laptops. At 7:23, one of the operators found something, bearing 285, speed 180 kilometers per hour, altitude extremely low, range 15 kilometers. They locked on. Inside the lead FP-1's tiny electronics bay, the threat warning receiver blinked red. The drone knew it was being tracked. But its wooden skin confused the radar. The returns were inconsistent, soft, and fading. Metal aircraft reflect radar waves sharply. Wood scatters them like ripples in fog. The Mineral ME kept losing lock. The operator reported the contact as intermittent, possibly birds. The FP-1's guidance logic responded automatically. It powered down all non-essential systems, switched to mechanical gyroscope mode, compass only. The drone was now a ghost, almost invisible to both radar and radio. But the Russians' countermeasures created new problems. There are 984 jamming units, designed to disrupt incoming drone communications, blasted out interference across multiple frequencies, between 20 and 1,000 megahertz. The jammers were so powerful they began to blind the ship's own sensors. This phenomenon had a name: electromagnetic fratricide. When your own defenses turn against you, the ship's radar clarity dropped with every burst of its own noise. At 7:25, the captain ordered a nearby patrol boat to investigate the uncertain contact. Within moments, the small Project 03160 Raptor patrol boat accelerated to 35 knots. The crew loaded the PKM heavy machine gun mounted at the bow. The gunner fed in a fresh 200-round belt and sighted down the barrel. They had done this hundreds of times during drills. Short bursts, lead the target, aim for 500 meters, engage anything that moves low and fast. But those drills were for metal drones, not plywood shadows skipping over the waves. The lead FP-1 had less than 3 minutes of fuel left. The third drone trailed behind, invisible but flying blind through dense morning fog. Visibility had dropped to just 500 meters. At 7:30, the lead FP-1 finally reached its target zone, 15 miles off Novorossiysk. The Russian spy vessel still sat at its usual position, oblivious. Its radar operators focused on the decoy attack far to the west, never realizing death was now approaching from the east. The spy ship's defense relied on coordination between its radar and the two patrol boats circling nearby. The system created an overlapping radar fence, each boat scanning a 120-degree arc, capable of detecting objects with a radar cross-section of 0.1 square meters up to 15 kilometers away. On paper, it was impenetrable, but nature had other plans. That morning, the Black Sea's surface temperature clashed with the cold dawn air above, creating a temperature inversion. Warm air trapped over cold water acts like a prism, bending radar beams upward. What the radar saw at 50 meters altitude might actually be 80 meters in reality. Anything below 30 meters vanished completely from the radar screen. The FP-1s flew just 3 meters above the waves. They were ghosts in plain sight. At 7:32, the first patrol boat visually spotted movement through the fog. A small object skimming the surface. The gunner opened fire. The PKM's rhythmic bursts echoed across the water, orange tracers zipping low. 3 bullets hit home. 2 punched clean holes through the plywood hull. 1 clipped the propeller. The drone shuddered violently, its engine rattling, but it kept going. Distance to target, 800 meters. Fuel, 90 seconds left. The damaged drone fought to stay level. On the spy ship's bridge, binoculars turned toward the south where the patrol boat was firing. The radio call came through. Inbound drone, bearing 285, damaged, but still flying. Officers scrambled, trying to locate it visually, but their eyes and their weapons were pointed the wrong way. From the northwest, hidden by fog, the third FP-1 emerged. Its mechanical compass had kept it miraculously on course. Flying just 10 meters above the sea, it closed in fast. At 7:34, the lead drone's engine seized completely, snapping its damaged propeller. It began to glide, powerless, splashing down short of the ship. Every Russian on board watched that splash, believing the danger was over. They never saw the real threat. From 300 meters out, the third FP-1 locked its camera on the ship's mast, the structure that housed the R381T intelligence array and Mineral M radar dish. The drone accelerated to full throttle, its 25-kilogram warhead armed. A Russian lookout shouted, "Too late." At 7:35, the FP-1 slammed into the base of the mast. The explosion tore through the bridge in an instant. Fireballs engulfed the electronics room. Antennas twisted into molten spirals. The R381T arrays, the ship's ears, capable of hearing a whisper from hundreds of kilometers away, melted into slag. Secondary explosions followed as power supplies went up in flames. By the time the fires died 18 hours later, the ship was still afloat but utterly blind. Its sensors, its entire reason for existing, were gone. 6 weeks of intelligence data, pattern logs, signal intercepts, all vaporized in seconds. When the wreck was towed back to port, the once sleek tower looked like a sculpture of twisted metal. A surreal melted relic of what had been Russia's most advanced electronic warfare ship in the Black Sea. And the message was clear. Ukraine's low-cost, wooden, hand-built drones had outsmarted one of the most sophisticated naval intelligence networks in existence. They had turned the sea's fog, the air's temperature, and Russia's own radar physics into weapons of stealth. Within hours, Ukrainian operators were already launching new waves of drones from fresh locations. New routes, new frequencies, new tactics. Russian analysts tried to re-establish the patterns they had once relied on, but every intercept now led to empty fields, every coordinate to abandoned shores. The spy ship would sail again, yes, but its eyes and ears were gone forever. Ukraine's silent fleet of plywood phantoms had rewritten modern naval warfare, and the Black Sea would never be the same. Make sure to like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more deep, cinematic military stories from around the world. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and stay ready.